everyone. This is our 31st Veteran ETA Roundtable. Really excited to have Lisa Forrest back with us. She was one of the first folks that was super supportive of this kind of initiative, almost 3 years ago. So it's great to have her back, and much needed topic to kind of get a refresh and have the ability to talk about where things stand with the SBA lending market and kind of structures and things Lisa's seeing in the industry. So I'm just going to give a quick intro on Lisa. Before I do that, again, as always, no legal advice for this. This is just educational. And then, I'm going to talk about Lisa's background and then kick it over to Lisa, and we'll do some Q&A as always. So Lisa is widely recognized as one of the nation's preeminent SBA lenders and a leading resource in SBA middle market M&A lending. She has deep expertise in small and medium-sized business acquirers. And she helps them successfully navigate transactions with enterprise values up to $25 million. She has more than 35 years of experience, and she's a trusted voice in the ETA and acquisition finance communities. You'll see her, if you Google her, a lot of guests speaking on, very big platforms, and, serving as a keynote speaker at ETA conferences as well. So we're just really, really, again, appreciate you, Lisa, being here. And then also just an update with Lisa. She recently joined Northwest Bank alongside Sarah Andrews, who I'm sure many of you all know, to support and expand the bank's growing SBA lending platform focused on acquisition entrepreneurs. And, as I stated, Lisa is a huge advocate of military veterans. The reason why I asked her 3 years ago and continue to ask her for her time is because, I talked to a lot of people and they're always like, I've been talking to Lisa, So she's always, so supportive of veterans trying to acquire businesses. And it's just a great person to have featured today. So thanks again, Lisa, and I'll hand it over to you.
Great. Thanks, Charlie. Really appreciate you having me on, and I'm happy to be here anytime. And I know you do this, and you also have a day job. And so that's the one thing about the military veteran community. Everyone's so collaborative and everyone is so generous with their time. And that's what I see time and time again when I come to speak to any veteran group or community. And it's just really inspiring. So it also inspires me to be, a more collaborative person too, just when I'm around, your community. And you make great operators, right? So also I'm here to provide really good, I think, good information, hopefully the right kind of information to continue to encourage you to explore this. And then Charlie, for your group, since we've got, probably 8 or 10 live people, I'm happy taking off a mute and just peppering me with questions too. So if that's going to be helpful for people seeing the recording afterwards, I'm very happy with just live questions as we go along. Terrific. Because I did have a question for the group. Are people actively looking? Is this you're interested in looking? You're so across the board. Who's joining us today? What do we have? If anyone would like
I'll
to
go,
offer.
Lisa.
Yeah.
So I'm actively searching. Got a prequel letter from you from Live Oak, but I wanted to kind of get your update on why you switched, what you're seeing in the market that made you switch for. I think it's Northwest, right? That made that be a more advantageous position, and then I guess probably a lot of people out like me who had Live Oak letters, prequel letters. Is it the same process over there at your new place?
Great. Well, I can get to that, and anyone else that would like to just share their thoughts on what they're kind of where they're at in their search process and what they're looking for on this call, I'm happy to have you weigh in.
Yeah, Jeremy Hans here, also full-time searching and multiple LOIs out. And 18 months later, we'll see if anything finally sticks.
Okay, good.
And I would just say, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Lance Hannock, I'm about 4 months from getting out of the military and actively searching. And I'm just kind of curious with all the SBA changes, the personal capital, and then bringing in investors to kind of balance that 10% and how that all works out.
Okay, great. And congratulations on transitioning soon. I'm sure there's a lot of nerves and excitement there. So congratulations to you.
Yeah, at least I'd say, like, of the people that spoke, it's kind of, that seems indicative of the the group at large is normally like a little over half are actively searching, maybe like 2/3. And then there's about a third that are kind of just, oh, this ETA thing sounds interesting, either in their MBA or kind of getting out of the military and looking to kind of jump in. So,
Okay.
yeah. And if anyone wants to post questions to the chat, I'll be monitoring that and can facilitate those questions as well.
Great. Well, then I will do a little bit of a plug for those of you that are maybe thinking about searching, or you're at the beginning part of your search. With my colleague, Sarah Andrews, we do a weekly office hours, a weekly kind of power hour every Wednesday. It's a live Zoom, and we'll go a whole hour over how the SBA works, all things SBA. We'll talk about industries. We'll talk about structures, SBA SOPs. We'll talk about the whole gamut. So Charlie, if you want people just to email me, I can give you links to register for that. It's every Wednesday unless we're traveling for work. And Lance, that might be a good one for you to hop on, and anyone else that's in the beginning part of their search or kind of sort of fixing to think about it. Again, every Wednesday, it's about an hour 15, and we'll do live Q&A at the end of this deck. In fact, I have this deck that I was going to share if we at all wanted to get into some of these topics, but happy to have you join us on that Wednesday call. And you just email me and I'll send you links to register. And then one of the questions was about, switching over. And I don't mean this to be a commercial for Northwest Bank at all, or any lender. This is about, talking about SBA, at least from my perspective. But, banks, this is almost my 40th year of banking. And banks can kind of change their focus as it might, kind of as their portfolios mature and they're needing to sort of balance aspects of the portfolio. So with Live Oak, I'll just say the focus kind of tended to be kind of trending toward wanting a little bit more real estate in the portfolio and maybe rounding out some of the larger loans with smaller loans. And so that's a very, legitimate strategy. It's just that for those of you who know me and my introduction here, my personal focus is business acquisition. So it just was a good time for me to pivot. And Sarah and I decided to pivot over to Northwest. Northwest is really growing in SBA business acquisition and in this ETA space, wanting to really kind of lean into that. So that was perfect timing for Sarah and myself. And we're excited and thrilled to be at Northwest. And we are kind of doing what we thought we were going to be doing. And so that's our story there. Anyone that had a pre-qual letter from me before, from Sarah and myself, same process. You send us your resume and your personal financial statement. You can send me an email. We can send you a secure link to send that in. And then we could look at doing a support letter for you. If you wanted to attend our kind of power hour, it's just helpful because it just downloads like an hour's worth of nuts and bolts. Typically, you kind of attend that first, and then we can do the resume and personal financial statement and then kind of craft a support letter for you. We call it a support letter versus a pre-qual letter because with a pre-qual letter, we usually, like a term sheet, we usually have your signed LOI in our hands, and we're giving you a vetted term sheet on that deal. If it's just sort of looking at your resume and your personal resources and maybe how that might dovetail with investors, we can give you a support or comfort letter, and we find that really does help with getting your access to the sell side information with that, because you've shown that you've gone through the starting process of talking to a bank that is kind of supporting you. So hopefully that answers your question. A couple of those questions out there, I think.
No, yeah, that was great. Thanks.
Good. So Travis, just email me. It's lisa.forrest@northwest.com, and I'm happy to get you another one refreshed.
Perfect. Thanks.
Great. So Charlie, I know you sent me kind of a list of topics. Do you want to kind of lead me through some of these? And I'm happy just to kind of riff. And if anyone, again, wants to ask a follow-on question or a live question, I'm happy to do that too.
Yeah, no, that sounds perfect. Yeah, and please, anyone jump in. I was just kind of thinking about some of the questions that I get a lot, and thought it'd be helpful to kind of have some of my questions ready to go, because I'll talk your ear off, Lisa, but please, everyone, jump in. I mean, I guess we could start, because you're, a dovetail on the topic you were just mentioning as far as getting a pre-qual letter. A lot of times I hear people say, I'm having my first or second conversation with an SBA lender. Like, what do I do? How can I stand out? What are some things, maybe even beyond, the financial statements and resume that, signal to, because I know lenders are inundated with a lot of people that are kicking tires. So kind of what sticks out to you as some things that you see as differentiating that in that initial, conversation?
Well, I would say you're already differentiated in the military veteran community. Your resumes generally translate and resonate really well. So I tell folks for my military veteran clients that you've already differentiated yourself really, really well. And I think that for the most part, you resonate really well with sellers. And I would, I just lean into that. Just lean into your background as a veteran. What kind of skill set? What was your experience? What were you doing in the military that translates, into that civilian resume? And I think that generally just largely already puts you head and shoulders above a lot of other potential acquirers. And I know there's this, well, I didn't go and get my MBA. And some of our military veterans do come out and get their MBAs. Great. An MBA is not required at all. We're looking at what you've done with your time so far, and the fact that you might have logistics, you might have led, hundreds of people from all kinds of all kinds of walks of life, plus all of the other kind of technical things that you've done for years in the military. For me, that outweighs just having an MBA on your resume. So if there's any folks listening, kind of differentiation, I think you've already got it. And I'd really lean into that. And I'd really lean into sort of translating that. If you're looking at manufacturing facilities or, plumbing or HVAC or any of the other, even an MSP, what have you, translate what you did during the day into kind of that civilian parlance. And I think that you already have the respect of a lot of the sellers out there that are especially in their, 70s and 80s that may have also served themselves. Charlie, I also wrote an article recently on just how to prepare yourself as a buyer. I sent that over to you on an email earlier. I'm happy to have you send that out to the group. But it's talking about kind of building, your buyer profile and, getting relationships set up like you're doing here. Understanding what, how much you can contribute, understanding a little bit about financially what your buy box looks like. And are you going to need to bring investors in and starting to pull on credit, bank and investor relationships. And then kind of developing a deal discipline. Once you start looking at active deals, you're going to get better and better at going through and analyzing them and starting to have some discipline around what makes sense for you. Now, in the beginning, you're probably going to have a really wide aperture, which I really recommend in my observation, because I'm not searching, but I'm observing people who are, that starting out with maybe a little bit wider aperture probably makes a lot of sense until you start to get to know yourself as you move along. I find that sometimes you think you know yourself, but you really kind of start to get to know yourself better and better as you're moving through lots of deal flow. And for those of you that have got some LOIs on the table, I think that comment might resonate with you. You might start out in one kind of quadrant and realize that you're moving through different quadrants as you go along. And that's okay. Just having some basic kind of discipline about how, you're looking at deals would be really, really helpful, and kind of building that strong deal team around you to help you do that. You're not an isolated person without any resources. In fact, again, this is not a plug for us per se, because there's other organizations and folks around you, but through this power hour that we do, we give you a bunch of templates, executive summary template, a cash flow model. We give you a bunch of resources in order to kind of have that discipline around your search. And then hopefully we're kind of part of you building a strong deal team, which I recommend that you do as you move along. But I did, those are just some excerpts around that, Charlie, and I did send that larger article over to you if you wanted to share it. That'd be fine.
Yeah, definitely. After this, when I share the link, I'll include that, and then maybe a registration link or your email if people want that registration. Because I can't say enough good things about, as someone that's seen your templates on the other side of things. It's really helpful to get vetted sources and these kind of initial sources of truth as you move forward. So that's all great, and I'll definitely get that out to the group. One thing you mentioned is kind of investors, thinking about investors. I wanted to get your take on, just generally talking to a lot of veterans. People have good jobs, but they're not maybe sitting on, generational wealth or some type of, nest egg where they're worried about that, the equity injection, right? That's kind of their concern. I mean, how do you, think about bringing on investors as someone, maybe doing their first deal, obviously complicating it with the structure, or I'd love to get your opinion on that investor process, the pros, cons, and then also just kind of things to look out for from a structural perspective when it gets to, credit committee and things that can go astray when you are bringing other folks onto the cap table.
Yeah. And I would say, 80% of the projects that Sarah and I work on have some amount of investors in the cap table. So we think investors equal good in most cases. The thing that investors can be doing to help you is not only just equity or money wise, but they could also be bringing expertise onto the board. They could be really good sounding board for you as you're looking at active deals. But not all investors are created equal, and you're not always looking for the same thing out of each investor. Depending on the deal, you could be looking for different things from an investor group, depending on how much equity you might need from them, or how much help you might need industry specialization wise compared to what your background is. So it could be very specific to the deal also. And with our military veterans, we see very strong resumes, and you're in the process of maybe creating some wealth. You've been spending years working for Uncle Sam, and the paycheck is not necessarily the same as if you were in the civilian workforce potentially. So working with lenders that understand the trade-offs on resume versus personal financial statement today are going to be really important for you to surround yourselves with lenders that get it. And I think the investors are absolutely going to get it. I think that are going to understand it. They, you've got a profile that is really sought after. So if you don't already know that, I hope you're figuring that out. And for Northwest, I'll just say that the size of the deal, the larger the deal gets, especially if you're looking for pari passu dollars. And what I mean by that is if you're going to maximize the SBA $5 million, and then you're also looking for some conventional dollars on top of the $5 million. So maybe you're looking at a $9 million transaction. You need $5 million SBA plus another $1 million of non-SBA guaranteed pari passu dollars, because we come in with $1 million conventional loans side by side with the $5 million of SBA. Once you get into non-SBA guaranteed dollars, then the personal financial statement starts to matter more, because now the lender's taking on non-SBA guaranteed risk. So $5 million and under for our military veterans, and I'll just say for anyone, I won't put a category on it, but if the personal financial statement is a little bit, shyer, if you will, and more of the equity is coming in from your investors, if you're 5 million and below, so that the loan is in that fully SBA guaranteed category, probably more leeway there, more flexibility. Once the lender, because the lender already on a $5 million transaction, 25% of the loan amount is unguaranteed. So you've already got, $1 million plus of exposure for that lender. And now we're going to add another $1 million of conventional. So now we're adding another $1 million of, exposure on that's not covered by the SBA. So once you start talking about those exposure levels that aren't going to be covered by the SBA's guarantee, the personal financial statement starts to matter a lot more. Whether you're in the military or not, that's not the dividing line there, but the personal financial statement matters more when the more exposure and risk you're taking on. So I would say that post-closing liquidity also matters. So that could be where larger transactions, might be off the table potentially, depending on the size of your personal financial statement. And it's really hard. You can see I'm kind of stumbling over a couple of words on exactly how to couch this. It's a lot easier for me to look at your resume, talk with you about your personal financial statement specifically, and then to talk about that deal size. But if you've got, say, $100,000 of cash, at least for Northwest Bank, I don't think a pari passu size deal is going to be on the table. But if you've got 5 million of risk and below, and you've got that solid resume, and you've got $100,000 of cash to contribute, that's probably in the wheelhouse with you, plus investors, plus bringing your investors in. Boy, I really got long-winded on that one, guys. Sorry.
No, that was great. And then if you could, as far as like actually the investors themselves, I know that just thinking about some things that I've seen that it flagged, like making, especially now, right, and correct me, you're the expert here, but like with any, foreign investors, or if it's a fund, making sure that that's vetted, or, from a structure perspective, what do you see causing issues if you see the investors kind of creep into what could be confused as the OpCo, or, just kind of how you think about it? Love your insights on kind of some things to avoid when you're, selling the deal to folks like you.
Yeah. So 100% U.S. citizen. That's the SBA changed that rule last May. 100% of the ownership has to be U.S. citizen. Not even a legal permanent resident with a green card. That doesn't qualify any longer. 100% U.S. citizen, all the way down to the smallest ownership percentage. So if you've got a fund of a fund of a fund in your cap table, that's fine. We're still going to drill down to the actual individual and their social security number. So if you have one German investor, 0.5%, you're going to have to sub them out or it won't be eligible. Where we see some things to really dial in with your investors early on is, say you are going to own less than 50%. So you are not in structural control of the company. Say it's a deal size where you're going to bring in your dollars, yes, and the investors are bringing in a lot of the dollars. Then, that we've seen structures where maybe you're going to own less than 50%. The operating agreement matters even more. The SBA is going to require that you are in control. You have to have control over decision making. You can't be a straw man or a straw person. So we're going to really dial into that. The distributions can't be mandatory. That was another change with investors. The distributions can't be mandatory. Distributions are allowed for taxes, and if the company's doing really well, you're allowed to make distributions. They just can't be guaranteed or mandatory. The equity is supposed to be the equity. So for us lenders that have been working with investors in the cap table for many, many years now, the rules actually didn't change anything. For those of us that have been doing well with it and doing a good job with it. I think what it did is it did clarify for maybe some lenders that just didn't really know to think about these kinds of things. But if you are a 51% owner or higher, we're still also going to be looking at that operating agreement to make sure that you are in control. But if you're below a 51% ownership, then we're looking at that operating agreement with even a finer tooth, just to make sure that you're our guarantor, you're our borrower.
Great. And then as far as like removal clauses as well, do you guys kind of scour that pretty closely as far as if the investors lose confidence, what they can do? I don't know if there's some provisions there that you're, to watch out for that could be a flag when it's at your review stage.
Well, you're our guarantor. You're PGing our loan. The investors can't remove you. You're guaranteeing our loan. So in conventional settings, that happens. You can get fired. If you're getting a conventional loan backed by more like a funded searchers, or funded investors doing a traditionally funded search, you could literally be fired. The removal clause is just not going to be eligible for SBA.
Great. And then one thing that you were mentioning is kind of the pari passu and kind of how to, bring funds together for maybe larger acquisitions. I know that one of the big things I think, that folks are interested in are kind of combining the 504 with the 507. I know that the $10 million, that's a relatively recent change, right? And so I'd just love your reaction to kind of how that's working out. If you think it's causing more problems, if people are trying to bite off a little more they can chew, or is it, are you saying, hey, look, tack on some real estate, that's a 25-year loan, like let it, that's a great deal. I don't know, what's your kind of guidance there, or is it very, dependent on the business and situation?
I think it was a really good headline. So, and that's okay. It's giving us more flexibility. It's giving more tools for us to use. Absolutely great. So the 504 program is also an SBA program that's been around for decades. And the 7A program, we've largely been talking about the SBA 7A program that allows you to do the business acquisition piece. 504 is set aside just for real estate and long-term assets, like think heavy duty equipment. And both were SBA programs. Before, just a couple months ago, you were limited to a $5 million maximum SBA dollars. And that was, say you had a $2.5 million 7A loan and you had a $2.5 million 504 loan. You just used up your $5 million allotment. Although I will say that with manufacturing, you always got another $5 million. And there was this program called the green program, the environmental program. If your real estate was qualified under the green program, you got another $5 million. So there's always been at least a little bit of this $5 million and $5 million that's been available. And so I think with that headline, I think a lot of people thought, oh, we can get a $10 million 7A loan. No, you can have a $5 million 7A loan, and now you can just straight up have a $5 million 504 loan. So 504 is for real estate. You can't finance business acquisition assets, intangibles under 504. So I do think it's going to open up a lot of opportunities. In fact, another plug, we're doing a webinar with one of the CDCs coming up. So if you kind of send me an email, you'll get on our radar, and we're doing it in another couple of weeks on the decoupling and what it really means for people. For the most part, on your first deal, we don't actually see a lot of real estate, and Charlie, you were looking, a lot of times the real estate isn't even involved. It's a lease, and it's real estate that's not actually popping it up over and above what can actually, and you can finance real estate under 7A too, right? So I don't know. It's an interesting headline right now. I think where this might be interesting is down the road, once you digest your first deal and now you're buying a second location or a second thing, and now you want to buy the real estate for that. Now you got more room. It's not a bad thing. It's just, I think that it came at a time where it's maybe the headline was needed. So I'm just going to leave it at that.
Hey,
That's helpful.
Lisa. Oh, sorry, Charlie, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Yep.
Thanks, boss.
Hey,
What do
Lisa.
you got?
No, my partner Matt and I are both veterans doing a full-time partner in search. We're actually scheduled to close next month.
Oh, great.
You passed on our deal in May. We were a little bit sad. We had a big frowny face, like Lisa Forrest passed on it, but it fell into that situation you talked about before, where it was big and had like $1.5 million of pari passu.
Yeah.
I guess I'm curious, how should vets and just how should searchers in general think about going directly to lenders like yourself versus using one of the lender brokers, kind of like a PCA, Viso, SMB loan support, something like that?
Yeah.
And then I guess second part of the question, how should we also think about, this is about to hit us in the face, like working capital line of credit and trying to get that set up either, hopefully simultaneously with close, because my understanding is it can be very difficult to access capital, once you close.
Well, I'll handle the working capital one first. You've especially on a sizable deal, you have to get your line of credit before close or at close. And I I don't want to scare you off or what have you, but coming back to get your line of credit later, if you're working with a bank that said, oh, well, let's focus on this for now because this is what I can get approved, and then you can come back later and then we'll give you working capital later, but this is all I can kind of squeeze in on an approval. I'd be a little nervous, especially if you've got a business that requires a significant amount of working capital. The larger the deal, usually the more working capital that's required. And sometimes it's not necessarily like working capital in the sense of, maintenance, CapEx and inventory. Sometimes it's just getting through transition. You're coming into the company at a month or a season where maybe it's a little bit down. And that working capital is going to be really, really important because you have transition risk, let alone operating risk. Transitioning your company can give you some hits. So you need to have a working capital at close. So I'm going to answer that question. And Matt, I'm happy to talk to you more also if this is in relation to maybe how you're getting it financed. I'm just happy to give you some feedback offline.
No, helpful.
Really?
I mean, it's something that we're working through right now.
Okay.
Whether it's, again, we don't have access to like the SBA working capital since we're going above the 5 million. So we're having to do like an asset-based line of credit, which is something I didn't know about until we started going through the process, but thought it might be helpful for some other folks on the call. And then I guess just back to the first question, how should folks on this call who have probably never even talked to a lender about buying a business think about using a broker or just going straight direct?
Yeah. And so most of my deals are coming direct from borrowers, clients. With loan brokers, and I get deals from loan brokers also. Some of the ones that you've mentioned, we definitely work together. And I think it's a personal choice for you on how involved you want to be. I mean, because talking to lenders, as you know, it's a lot of work. It is a lot of work. It's a full-time job. If you have to talk to say 2 or 3 or 4 lenders yourself, some of our clients have said that they wouldn't do it any other way. They want to know exactly what the lender's process is. They want to know exactly when they get a commitment letter. They want to know exactly what went into that commitment letter. So sometimes the kind of the downside of using a loan broker, from what I can observe, is sometimes there's a lot of you talk to your broker, the broker talks to us. We talk to the broker, they talk to you. You talk to the broker, they talk to us. And I don't know how to capture what might get lost in there. I just do think it is important, regardless of whether you come direct to a lender or you use a broker, you've got to know exactly how the lender is making their decisions. Because sometimes just because you get a loan approval doesn't mean that's a good thing. So I think that if you're using a loan broker, I think you need to insert yourself into the process as much as possible. But I know that that's the reason you get a loan broker, is so that you can maybe take some of that off your plate. But I think that there should be maybe more involvement from the actual borrower.
Yeah, no, I think that's our experience as well. It just, to use a military term, it's not fire and forget. Even if you're using a broker, still at least somewhat actively managing that relationship and what's getting passed on to the lenders.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Lisa.
Yeah, you bet. And hey, I'm happy to talk to you offline, by the way.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Lisa, and somewhat related to what we've been discussing as far as when to engage with lenders, I've had, some folks who've had a good first acquisition looking at other targets, but they still have this SBA debt. Maybe it's down significantly. How do you, or like, is it, what would your advice be to those folks if they're thinking about, hey, I have a couple, now that I'm a business owner, maybe their deal flow is a little better. When should they maybe think about jumping in and trying to get another acquisition under their belt, and how, complicated is that kind of refinancing process with your bank?
I will say that, just to say something a little controversial, because that's fun, I'm not on the Holdco bandwagon. We have people that will call us and they'll say, hey, I'm a Holdco and I wanted to talk about X, Y, and Z. I'm like, great, tell me about your first acquisition. Oh, no, I haven't bought anything yet, but I'm a Holdco. I'm like, well, are you? So my point there is, you gotta have, I don't have one set answer for you. You have to fully transition that company. With some acquisitions, it could take you 2 years to fully transition. It depends if you have a hiccup or an uh-oh. Are you having to clean up some sort of, holy shit situation that you weren't expecting? Does that take you 2 years to do that? I would say, just off the top, without any firm statistics under my belt here, it's going to probably take you a good 18 months. But I know, opportunistic stuff comes up. You've transitioned for 6 months and now you've got the guy down the street selling, and you want to be able to take advantage of that. So we're working on 4 right now, where we're refinancing the existing SBA lender to help them buy the second thing. So we're doing actually quite a bit of that. I just think that for the first time buyer, and maybe on this call, maybe not so much, because part of what you're so good at is cleaning up things that went wrong that weren't supposed to have gone wrong. And so I think with a lot of first time buyers, they are shocked at how hard transitioning the business is. They're just shocked at it. So even if they started out with a holdco idea, that quickly changes to, oh my gosh, let me make sure that I can transition the thing that I bought to make sure that it's the thing that I thought I bought. So, I mean, we're very open to refinancing the SBA lender and then giving you additional dollars. We're very open to that. I just think it probably takes you longer to transition these really messy lower middle market companies than you might be expecting.
That's great advice. Yeah, I get that question a lot, and I have similar kind of feelings on it as well. And then maybe just kind of
can I just add on that? Just keep in mind, if we're refinancing seller notes, if you guys had your SBA loan plus a seller note, there's that gets a little tricky, because the seller note has to be being paid for 2 years, interest only, a minimum 2 years for the seller note to be included in that refi. So if you're coming in a year later and the seller note's not eligible to be refinanced, just keep in mind that seller's going to have to now subordinate to your new debt. And if you've got a tricky seller relationship, sometimes that gets a little weird. If the seller's was already subordinated, so why do they care if they now subordinate to a new lender? But sometimes that whole conversation can get a little tricky if your transition with your seller hasn't gone real well. But just keep in mind 2 years payment on at least interest only on the seller note, for that to also be included for refi.
Great. No, that's super helpful. And kind of talking about seller notes, maybe going back to the equity injection conversation, but are you seeing now that requirement that, for an equity injection, it must last 10 years. Do you see that as kind of doing away with seller notes as an equity injection, in the market? Or do you think that's something to, at least for the folks on the call, to at least try to kind of use as a possible tool?
Yeah. And thank you for that. So the rule with SBA, a minimum of 10% down is the equity injection requirement, minimum 10% down, with a little bit of a caveat there. Bare minimum, 5% has to come from the buyer. And that could be a combination of you and your investors, but bare minimum 5% from the buyer. Then that other 5% of the 10% can be made up in the form of a full standby seller note. So that means no principal and interest being paid on that seller note for the full life of the SBA loan, which is 10 years. And that way you can take your 5% plus the seller note 5% on standby. That equals 10%. So yeah, we're seeing that. We're seeing sellers go for it. Keep in mind that it's going to be lender to lender on how we sort of receive that. For our military veterans that have really deep resumes, we would probably approach that more favorably than someone that, coming out of private equity for 2 years and that's it, so resume matters there. We're certainly seeing it for inside buyers that might be key managers or actually buying the company they're working in. That one seems to be, really well received. And then we're probably not necessarily going to do just 95% financing. You come in with 5%. Yes, we understand the seller note is there too, but it's really kind of technically 95% financing for that first, little bit there. We might want an extra seller note on top of it that maybe you could be paying on, but maybe take our risk down a little bit more. So there may be some nuances to how we want to structure the capital stack there. And we'll say that kind of a double-edged sword, I think. I think part of you might think, oh, that means, gosh, the seller's really committed, really confident in this company and me transitioning it. Man, that seller's willing to put that seller note on for 10 years. Well, the seller might say, oh, I only really wanted to get this out. It's just the SBA loan. That's all I really wanted to get out of the company anyway. So this extra 10-year note, whatever. It's not necessarily really holding them to be committed to your transition. That's a real cynical way to look at it. I understand that, but there are those situations where the seller note, even though it's on 10-year standby, it's not necessarily the signal that you think it might be. So that's where you just have to really have that gut feel about your relationship with the seller.
Great. So I guess we have a few more minutes here. Thank you so much again for all your time. Maybe, please close with any kind of parting thoughts. And then also just would love to hear, as someone that's been doing this for, a long time and sees a lot of deals, kind of where you think, the industry's headed, any type of kind of, where do you think ETA is going to be in 3 years or 5 years? Would love just kind of your thoughts on the future of this space as it continues to kind of get more sophisticated and grow.
Happy to weigh in that. I do really think our veterans have an ETA advantage. I started with that at the beginning, and I'll just kind of end with that before I talk about where I see this all going. I do think you have an ETA advantage with the sellers. I think you're already differentiated, and just from the standpoint of your resumes and your operational abilities and your operational chops, I think that you are head and shoulders above most average ETA acquirers. So just know that. I'm happy to chat with you at any time. Make myself available to you at any time. Now, sort of looking ahead, one thing that I really have appreciated in this sort of last year, say 2026, I do think the conversation out there in social media land is a lot more balanced conversation about not just buy any business at any cost. It's like so easy, just do 100% financing. I think a lot of that BS has softened a lot. And for that, I'm very happy. I felt like I was the cranky neighbor by myself out there, like Sarah and myself, we were the cranky neighbors talking about all, and then we were forced to just talk about all the negatives because no one else was for a really long time. And now we can actually talk about some of the positive stuff because I do feel like the conversation's a lot more balanced around diligence, making sure that you are the right fit for that deal and that the deal is structured well. And really, sometimes the not getting the deal is the best thing that can happen to you. So I just feel like there's just a lot more balanced conversation out there. And I see good things for ETA. I never have not seen good things for ETA, but I just see a lot more balanced road. It's still so hard for those of you on this call that have finally got some LOIs in, how hard it is. I don't have to tell you how hard it is. It is. I'm just hoping that there is, more of a balanced perspective out there with all of the service providers clamoring to get your business. I just hope there's just a lot more balanced conversation out there.